Hello, everybody. This is
Awesome.
your host, Chris Baker Jr., and you're watching the podcast or listening to the podcast, Tell Me Your Story. And today's special guest is Tasha Ray. Tash, I can't get
Tisha.
Tisha
Tisha.
Ray. I mean, Tisha
Yep, that's
Miller.
it.
Sorry, it's Tisha Miller.
Yep,
And we're going to
that's
do like how
it.
we always do. We're just going to go into the very beginning of the story. Talk about
Okay.
where did you grow up at? Where did your childhood take place?
All right. So I am Cleveland born and raised. Um, I grew up on the east side of Cleveland, right in the middle of I'm gonna say in the middle of the hood. So I grew up. Um, I come from very interesting beginnings. Very, very interesting beginnings. I am uh just to put it out there immediately. My father was a minister, and my mom was a young girl. I am a pretty much a product of rape, and I've come to deal with that and come to terms with it in so many different ways. I mean, like, it's really shaped a lot of who I am and how I operate in the world and how I communicate, how I move around in the world. Um, it took me a while to really say that out loud, but that's who I am and that's where I'm from. My mom was um, very poor growing up, and my dad actually was from Arkansas originally. Um,
Hold on, I just want to add. I just want to say I'm just proud of you for being able to do that, for being able to, speak about that, to talk about that, because I know that's a very hard thing.
yeah, yeah, it's therapeutic in a way because for the longest time I felt like I didn't have a voice, and I felt like I didn't know what my voice was. I didn't know what that sounded like, and I it took me a very, very long time to really kind of cultivate who I was and why I was even here on this earth. I had those questions a lot, you know. Um, so just going back to who my father was, he was a guy from Arkansas, came to Cleveland in like the 50s, to make a better life. He was a part of the Great Migration. He was older. He was born in 1935. Um, and that's like right after like the Great Depression and right before like World War II. So understanding like the era that he grew up in was really it really gave me insight as to, even after he passed away, as to who he was as an individual.
So your dad was so old that when God said,
Hmm.
"Let there be light," he turned on the switch.
Damn near, damn near,
I just had to
damn near.
put that
Like
out there.
if my father was alive now, he would be in his 80s, and I'm 35.
Wow, you're
So
35.
yeah, yeah, I'm 35.
What's your secret?
Let there be light. Let there be light. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And water. Got to get back to the elements, right?
Water's the best. I try to tell a lot of people that drink as
Yeah,
much as you can.
absolutely, absolutely. So, like for me, I also just have an affinity for a lot of things because of how I grew up. Like, um, I shouldn't be, or according to like statistics and everything, I shouldn't be who I am or where I am or what I am. I shouldn't be. I just shouldn't be because of how I came into this world. You know,
Yeah.
um, my dad had, you know, he was a guy who I really do believe suffered from a lot of personality disorders and also suffered from, um, and I don't know if this is suffering, but I believe that he had narcissistic personality disorder now looking back. I really do believe that that was who he was. And I also believe that he had a few mental disabilities as well. And I do also believe that I'm not even going to say I believe that, I know he was a pedophile.
Hmm.
So he was. So him preying on young girls was just something that he did. And no one was able to stop him because that narcissistic personality kicked in and he kind of just went through this whole kind of I know everybody, so anybody that you go and tell, no one's going to believe you. Which I think a lot of pedophiles really do, to kind of scare their victims into not saying what the truth is and not speaking out about what's happening to them. And a lot of people, I feel like they knew that my dad, because what's so crazy is before he even got to my mom, like he could have been taken out. He could have been stopped.
Yeah, but
My dad was 50,
like you
he
said,
was
people
52.
were just too afraid to speak out against
Yeah,
him because of the power you can
yeah,
that he held, you know.
yeah. So he was 52 when I was born, and my mom was 16. So even like understanding, I had to really understand my mom's history too. She just opened up to me like a couple years ago to really like tell me her story. And I think she was, and I'm not going to say I think, I know she was very embarrassed by everything because a lot of people blamed her, you know, and that is what happens usually. Just society, period, starts to victim blame and victim shame instead of coming to the rescue and saying, hey, this isn't right. We need to change this, you know? Um, and I feel like my grandmother and my grandfather tried, but it was a fine line because they ended up being friends with my dad, of course, later on.
So it all ended up working out in a way, you're saying?
I'm going to say um, my life was, oh my gosh, mm, it was uh, heaven and hell. It was kind of like a purgatory in the same house, you know. Along with that narcissistic personality, my dad was physically abusive, but he was also a pastor. He had an actual church with the congregation. So, you know,
I know that's what I
no
was
one,
thinking as soon as you said minister. I was like, oh, she must have had a good childhood. But now here's the
yeah.
complete opposite. I'm like, oh,
I told you, like, my story is so interesting. It's like my dad was 52, my mom was 16, and we actually ended up moving in the house with my dad and his wife. I was maybe 2 years old when that happened. I actually do remember that night, like actually moving in, because I remember it vaguely, but I remember my mom having stuff like all over the bed, like, and she was playing music, and I remember the gospel song that she was actually playing. But moving in, and I was thinking, I was like, that had to be when we actually moved in, because why would all of that stuff like be all over the bed? I was young, very super super young, like 2 years old. And we ended up moving in the house because my grandmother's house, where my mom and I were living, she didn't have heat. Um, and just to kind of go back a little bit, my grandmother met my dad because he started the church up the street from her house.
hmm.
Okay. And where they were living, I guess my grandmother was looking for another church home at the time. And so she saw my dad was starting the church. She went and talked to him and, took the family to church on Sunday, pretty much. So my dad got to meet like all of because my mom comes from a family of nine. So he's meeting, everyone at that point. And this is the early 80s. Okay. Um, my mom actually went to school with my older sister.
What?
And yeah, my mom went to school with my older sister. Mind you, I told you my mom was really young when she met my dad.
Yeah.
So my sister was maybe like a year younger than my mom, if that, like maybe a few months younger than my mom. So they went to school together. And so my dad was like, oh, okay, well, kind of like using my sister as a cover, she's here. Oh, my daughter is here. So, your daughters can, come with my daughter. And it was kind of like that scenario
Yeah.
from what I understand, from what I understand. And so my dad, from what my mom told me, he started molesting her at 13. And so by 15, or a little after she turned 15, she became pregnant with me. And she was still living with my grandmother, and my grandfather. My grandfather worked for the city, but he was also alcoholic, very heavily, very heavy. And so my grandmother was really supporting 9 children by herself. So she was always working. And so I can see how my mom kind of fell through the cracks.
Yeah.
I can see how that whole situation kind of transpired and was kind of broken down. I can see it. I see it very vividly because she was, one of 9 kids that my grandmother had to keep an eye on. If my grandmother was working, that leaves, everybody kind of wide open. So my mom ended up getting pregnant with me, and she hid me the entire pregnancy up until literally a few days before she actually had to have me. And she lied at first and told my grandmother that if someone else was the father. Um, and I'm not exactly sure, if my dad threatened her or if he told her, something else, that nobody would believe her. I don't know exactly what that was, but um, I do know that I got here,
You're here.
I'm here, and we stayed with my grandmother for like the first year of my life. My mother was still in school. She's still in high school. She graduated on time. But by the time my mom did graduate, we were living with my dad. And I actually still remember going to my mom's high school graduation.
From what you remember, how was it?
I had fun because it was fun for me to see all she went to East High School here in Cleveland, so their gowns were gold and blue,
Huh.
or yellow and blue. But they were like really shimmery and really pretty. So I'm like, I absolutely remember that. And I was really cute too. I had pigtails, and I was with my grandfather and my uncle. Yeah, I loved going to school with my mom. Loved it. So like, even like throughout college, when she went to college, I would go to class with her sometimes. Loved that because it was like I got extra attention.
I bet all the attention he was getting.
I was a little kid. So yeah, but my dad was like really, really abusive, like very abusive. And he manipulated getting my mom into his house. He manipulated having my mom like really close, even with me. And he made sure that, he was going to take care of me. But there was like kind of like stipulations to it. It was like, it was with condition, you know? Um, so me being there, I remember like my dad was a country man too. Okay, so let me clear this up. And I feel like we don't talk about now. We're starting to talk about narcissism more than ever, because we're really starting to recognize it as like a personality disorder. You
Mhm.
know, so we didn't know what that was back then, right? But my dad was so good to the people outside of his household, and he was so crappy to the people in his house.
Yeah.
And that's one of the big markers of narcissism.
Around you, I've heard that story so many times where, they paint a beautiful picture on the outside world, but
Hmm.
when behind closed doors, complete
Crappy,
disaster.
crappy. And I say that because I'm like, I had to think about it. My dad had 10 children. It was 10 of us, and possibly an 11, but his wife only had 5, and they were married for 50 years.
And I just thinking, how did she feel about the whole?
I know that lady was the sweetest woman. If I would ever come across grace and beauty and mercy, she was so, so sweet. She was docile too. She didn't say much. She didn't say a lot. She didn't speak a lot. And I imagine that she really didn't speak a lot because of my father.
Yeah,
I imagine that she really didn't say much because her life was completely dependent on him.
and being that he was very controlling, that
Yes,
she wasn't.
yes.
Yeah,
And I remember him saying that she left him once, and I believe she left him when she found out about the first child that he had outside. And he begged her to come back. She went to Arkansas. She went back to Arkansas with her family. And I don't know the reason why she came back, but she went back. And he continued to have children. My dad, he had an impulse that he just didn't control when it came to young girls. And this is crazy too because this is all before he became a minister, mind you. I came after, everybody else came pretty much before. All the other kids came before. Um, but my father had a lady that he, was friends with, and then he befriended her. Then he befriended her daughter. Her daughter was grown. She was grown with children of her own, and that's who he had two of his children with outside of his wife. And then she became very sick. She became ill, and she was away from the house a lot, in the hospital a lot. He then turned his sights to her then 13, 14-year-old daughter and had a child with her. And afterwards, you know, had a child with her other daughter. So there was just a lot going on. And like I said, nobody stopped him. Nobody said, hey, this is not right. Nobody whooped his behind. Nobody, because he was just like, and I believe, like, I remember hearing stories about like the police being called and people saying stuff, but he's always touted that he was friends with council people and he, could get out of anything. And really, when things did happen, he actually started molesting my sisters. And someone did call like the police on him and, had him arrested, but he told them that he was pretty much crazy. So instead of taking him to jail, they took him to the psych ward.
wow.
So he knew how to manipulate and get things out and say, "Hey, look, I'm not, I'm not a criminal. I'm just crazy." You know, and that worked in that day for whatever reason.
Yeah, he was just good with the tongue, trickery.
Manipulative, and but this is the thing, though. He always was, like I said, he was good to everybody else. He was good to people. And I'm saying that because my dad was, like I said, he was from the country. And so he was, the neighborhood like guy that had he had chickens. We had chickens in the backyard. This is before this even sustainable urban farming became a thing, okay? 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, because my siblings are now in their 60s. So when they were coming up, he would, go and buy a pig or buy a cow and just give, his neighbors, make sure his neighbors were set with meat. And he had a store, a neighborhood store. He had a what they call like a juke joint, like an after hour spot, for people to come and hang out and stuff like that. He had all of those things.
Just it's
Right?
crazy just thinking about it. Like I could just imagine being like a neighbor and like painting your dad as this, this
Mm-hmm.
great guy, because he's doing all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff for the community. But
And takes
you know,
care of his family,
yeah,
and
and
all of his kids are fed. And regardless of whoever, like everybody is good, he took on his the my older siblings mom's other children too, so everybody was growing up in the house together, and all of that was happening, all of that was going on. And literally he was like, his kids knew him as just this tyrant, you know
Yeah.
you know so we would get chickens every single year. Like he would have like maybe 50, we would buy like 50, or he would buy like 50 chickens, like from babies, and raise them and kill them. And the whole neighborhood would have chickens. And then he also bought turkeys every year. And he'd raise them. By Thanksgiving, everybody had a turkey.
So in a way, I think my story, what I was telling you earlier, is I think God was preparing me for your story. The way you're describing it now, like,
Yeah.
okay, I see what you were doing now.
So it was always a question of what he did inside his home, or is that any of anybody else's business? No, it's not. I remember getting in trouble. I was probably like 3 years old because I saw him hit my mom. I saw him be physically abusive to her. And I went back and I told my grandmother. And for a minute, I wasn't allowed in my grandmother's house because I talked too much.
Well,
Imagine being 3 years. I'm 3 and I can't go to my grandmother's house because I can't go see my grandma because I'm telling her I know it's not right. Like I know that's not right.
yeah,
And I feel like kids are the biggest filters that kids are so honest and so pure and so open. They know when something just isn't right, right? And so as they grow older, they're conditioned to be other ways, whether it's racist or sexist or whatever is out there. They're raised to be that way, homophobic, however.
yeah,
They're raised that way. Um, because children love everybody, and they can tell you when something just is not right.
yeah. They know it's not right.
Right. So I would go back and I would say, hey, he hit mom, he hit mom. And of course that would anger my grandmother. That would make her so mad. And so she would say something about it. And of course, I got in trouble.
Like, who was it? Your dad that said something to you, or your mom that said
Oh
something?
yeah, my dad, and I remember that whooping very, very clearly. That was I was
He whooped
3.
you because you said something?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I remember that very, very clearly. I had on this little yellow nightgown. Um, I I remember my sister was still living with us. Um, my sister was still living with us, and my mom had graduated yet. My mother ended up staying at my grandmother's house for the night, and my dad ended up dropping my mom off at my grandma's house, and he brought me back home specifically because I think he was I think he was like telling me in the car like I should shut up and I shouldn't say anything. And I got out of the car, I was crying because crying
Yeah.
3, you know. And before I knew it, I was back in the car with him on my way home, and I got a whooping when I got home. And so even like little things like that, and people like think that kids like don't remember stuff. I was 3 years old when that happened. I am 35 now. You know what I'm saying? That is a very, very pointed memory for me.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking, because at the time, kids' brains are like a sponge.
Yeah,
So being able that happened at such a young age, that stayed with you throughout your entire life.
for my entire life. So I didn't say anything. Like whatever I saw, I couldn't say nothing. You know, I remember being like 7. I was probably about 7, and I think my mom and dad had had a discussion about finally telling me for sure, that he was my father, right? And because at this point, it was so weird to me, like how what that dynamic was. I didn't really know. I knew because everyone would always say, "Oh, you look just like him." Oh, you literally you remind me of, you just look like him, because I'm literally, it's like my dad spit me out. Big head, full face. I look like
Spitting
that man.
image, pretty much, yeah.
You said what?
The spitting image of your father.
Yes, very much so. So there was no denying me. Like, he could not say, "Oh no, that's not my child." No way, no way, because I look just like him. And so my mom and dad, I think I was about 7, and they decided to, bring me in and tell me that, that's your dad and whatever. And I remember crying so hard because it was almost like there was nobody there to save me. You know, I was thinking maybe if my dad was somebody else, maybe he'd come rescue me. Maybe he'd come get me out of that place. And once that was said to me at that age, it was kind of like there is no hope.
Yeah.
Like, I'm stuck here.
And then also at the same time, I'm thinking, because you can't really turn to God because of your dad being a minister and everything, and that kind of painted a different picture for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had so many struggles with the whole aspect of religion, period, because of what my household was like.
Yeah,
We go, people go to church and they talk about, oh, you live in this way, or act a certain way on Sunday, and then on Monday you live in a totally different life. And I'm like, that is what I live. That's what I grew up with. That was me all the way. Like,
yeah.
on Sunday, he's preaching to, a congregation. He's preaching to, we're going to service after service. And, he played the guitar too. So, you know, all of this is going on, and we are singing, and we're, expected to be whatever. And on Monday is something completely different. Although, I tell you, I couldn't listen to any R&B. I couldn't listen to any rap. I listened to no secular music whatsoever. Only gospel growing up. I only wore skirts growing up. Was only allowed to wear skirts. We were Pentecostal, black Pentecostal church. So I was not allowed to wear pants, even for gym in school. I was not allowed to wear pants at all.
And that's what I was gonna ask you. How was it in school for you? How was
School was an escape,
that was yeah, that's what I
really.
was thinking. Like, was that your escape
Yeah,
from
it was an escape. And my mom always, she teases me now a lot. She's like, "You talked so much in school." And I'm like, "That's because I had no one to talk to at home. I couldn't talk to anybody.
now?
You
Were you
know,
a good kid in school, or are you like the
I
troublemaker?
was, I know I was a good kid. I'm like, I got good grades. I was honor roll student. You know, I, I had to.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't have a choice. I better had kept my grades up, but I did love school though. Like, I really, really loved school.
So in a way, that was
Um,
kind of like your church, pretty much. Is that's how you
yeah,
got away?
that's
Your
how
peace.
that is that is where I escaped to. Um, because I wasn't allowed to do like sleepovers or anything. I wasn't allowed to go to anybody's houses for real. I literally, like, growing up, me being in the world that I was in, I was very isolated as a child. And I was in church every Tuesday, Friday, and Sunday. Tuesday, Friday, Sunday. Tuesday, Friday, Sunday. And I would think like the other kids would, didn't have to come to church all those days. They, had sports events they went to, you know, stuff. I couldn't do any of that. I couldn't stay after school for anything. Like, it was like school, home, and you better come straight home, and you can't go anywhere else.
Really, you weren't able to go anywhere. You weren't allowed to stay with friends. Friends were not allowed
Nope.
to come over. Or
I had friends who came over, but usually they were friends. They were um, granddaughters of my dad's friends.
oh, okay, I see.
You know, And I remember one specifically. Um, we even had like girls on the street. They would come over into the yard, and I could play with them, you know, sometimes. But then that fizzled out really fast because the one girl, I think she was a little loud, and my dad was like, "No, no, no, she can't come up back over here." Okay. Um, but he had a best friend um, that he worked with like a while ago, and or a while ago, but while I was young, he had worked with him, years prior,
Yeah.
and he had a granddaughter who was about my age, and I loved going to her house. I loved being able to play with her. But like as she got older, of course, like that dynamic starts to change because she's a teenager and she's getting all the stuff that she really, wants. Her grandparents spoiled the heck out of her. She had wireless keyboard and stuff before those were even a thing. Like crazy wireless keyboard attached to the TV.
How were you like? How were you reacted to that? Just being able to see
I
all that
was
stuff.
I was I was lightweight jealous,
Yeah, we all would
you
be.
know.
I'll admit that.
Yeah, jealous. Um but then our personalities started to really kind of show, and I couldn't do the things that she did. She was allowed to be a lot more free, and I just couldn't.
You didn't have that freedom. Yeah.
I didn't have it. So um eventually, like, my dad also had like congestive heart failure. He had heart attacks, a couple of them. um he had one like right after I was born, and then another one probably like a few years later, like 93. I remember him being in the hospital. He had open heart surgery that year. Um, and it slowed him down a lot. Slowed him down a lot, but he was still a tyrant, you know?
Yeah.
Um, Still. But I appreciated the part of giving, you know? He was the one who really taught me how it's better to give than to receive.
Yeah.
He really, really, and even as crazy and problematic that household was, I still learned so much being there just about people and how to really care for people. Um, I learned that because I really saw him really be a blessing to people outside of us.
So it like
And I saw it.
pretty much how you're describing it is like basically through all the stuff that you've dealt with, all this pain and all this, it helped you develop into the person that you are right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I had to and I told my mom, like, you gotta understand like where I what I came up with. I grew up around decent people,
Yeah.
you know. I wasn't prepared for the world like that. And when I say prepared for the world, I thought that if I was good to people, that people would be good to me. That's not how the world works. And that was a very hard lesson to learn
Yeah.
because I was just like, okay, well, I'm just going to be, I'm going to be good to folks and giving and loving, and people take advantage of that. And I realized now my dad was he took advantage of that, you know.
Hmm.
And I didn't realize it then. I didn't know then because I was so young, I didn't know that, but he took advantage of that, you know. And I was wondering like why his friends never called him out, why maybe even like the pastors that he congregated with didn't call him out. Like, why he really called him out?
Yeah, that's all I'm thinking too. Is like because it's so common anymore that you see it, left and right, where people of the
Yeah,
church call it out for stuff that you would never think would
right,
happen in a million years, but here it is.
right. So I had to understand too that my mom was growing up with me. She was still a child having me,
Yeah.
and there was a lot of blame on her for me being here. and for what happened and how my dad got a hold of her. There was so much blame on her. And I remember just not knowing, how to really kind of deal with that and how to reconcile that because I didn't understand why people just didn't like my mom. You know, I didn't get it. I'm like, what is
And what do you
my
gotta
mom's
get to
a
your mom?
yeah, she's an amazing person. I love her whole life. You know, um, I didn't get it. But it was also because my mom moved in with my dad and his wife,
And then
and
nobody knew the real story of why.
exactly,
So yeah.
exactly. So they would say things to my mom like, oh, she's the mistress, she's this, and my mom is just 17, 18 years old, having a 3-year old at the time, 2 and 3-year old at the time, just graduating high school, trying to really figure out the world, you know? And so I realized now that I really grew up with my mom. My mom, she spent her very formative 20s in the household with my dad.
Would you say like your relationship with your mom, you became like best friends? Or
Definitely now. Definitely now. That took a lot of time to develop. And I'm going to say it took time because like as a preteen, I didn't have a lot of her because she was trying to escape my dad.
yeah.
Um, I remember maybe I turned like 11. When I turned 11, probably that summer, is when my dad actually started molesting me. And I remember my mom not really being in the house so much, which was another reason why he was able to get to me. And he would say things like, "You told your mom, she would never believe you. Um, you tell anybody, they ain't gonna believe nothing you say." And that was very consistent. So the breakdown and what that happened, my dad messed up. He messed up hugely. My sister, my oldest sister, started to come back around, and she had kids. She had a daughter. She has a daughter who is a couple months older than me, but we're the same age. And her daughter, my niece and I got really really close because we were the same age, and we were going to church together, and of course, like I just loved having somebody else around, you know.
Yeah.
Um, I because I craved that so much,
To finally have
and
that
she was there,
connection. Yeah.
right? And she was there, and I remember us. We went out of town together. We went to we had a church convention in Columbus, and my dad took me and her, and that was all good. But we couldn't do a lot of the activities because my dad was like, "No, you're not staying out." They had like late night stuff for like young folks, and I couldn't. We couldn't stay out. You know how church conventions are, right?
Hmm.
Like they have like all kinds of stuff, like the old folks in mid and day, and then the young folks at night, right?
Yep.
But we had a ball. We had so much fun. And then, like a few weeks later, my niece told my sister that my dad touched her. And me, my dad, the way he broke it to me was so sinister. Like, kind of like she said that I did this and she said that I did that. I didn't do any of that. And so, and at the time, I didn't know a lot about the history, but I knew that my dad was doing the same thing to me. So I was probably 13, 13 at the time, maybe, yeah, about 13. And my sister ended up pressing charges against my dad.
Yes.
but nothing came of it, because they had like no definitive proof that he did it.
And then at the time, you couldn't really use your voice either because you felt like you had
Exactly.
no voice.
And I so wish that I had, because we went to the police station together. Actually, we went down to the detectives unit, to the special crimes unit together. And he like rehearsed me. Like, you're gonna say that you weren't there, and you're gonna say that you don't know, and you're gonna say, like, it was a constant like rehearsal. And I so one of my biggest, I guess, regrets in life was that I didn't speak up then. But I didn't know how,
Yeah.
I didn't know how. So probably a year after that, about a year, um, we got a call from Child Protective Services, because I was living with my dad, my mom had since married. Okay, and she was staying um, in a suburb, and when she married, I really wasn't allowed to go around because my dad didn't want me around her husband.
Wait, wait, wait. You kind of left that out. So your mom ended up leaving and finding
Hmm.
somebody. Okay.
Yeah,
Kind of explain
yeah,
that a little bit.
yeah. So my mom left my dad's house. I was probably about 11 years old when she left, and kind of like when she left, his sights kind of set on me, because she's not really there to protect me. She's not really there, whatever. And I think he was really hurt by my mom leaving, because he thought that he was going to be able to control her forever. And my mom was like, "No, I'm getting the hell away from you. I'm out." You know. And I remember her saying that he like pushed her down, like slapped her down, um, and like had her on the floor, like had her on the floor and him on top of her, and she's trying to get up, and he's like putting his knee like around her, like in her face, like telling her she wasn't going anywhere. And she left and she never came back.
Who would?
So, um, but when she did come back, she would kind of like try to like appease him a little bit, like try to like sweet talk him, and just and she was always working. My mom was such a hard worker, like very hard worker. She was working a lot, and that's where she met her husband at work. And so that ended up happening, and so they got a place together. I was still in middle school when that happened. They got a place together, and I remember like having middle school like promotion, like graduation from middle school into high school, right?
Yeah.
And my niece was still like, this hadn't happened with my sister and my niece yet. This was like the summer before, and I couldn't go to like a Cedar Point trip, so nobody was going to be in school that day because all the eighth graders went to Cedar Point, and I couldn't go because it was after the time that they wouldn't get back until after the time that school was out,
Yeah.
and my dad would not let me go. So my mom was like, you know what? She was like, well, I'll just come and get you that day, and you can just hang with me that day. And my mom ended up, I went to school because my mom stayed on the west side. She stayed right up the street from my school. So she stayed on the west side. She came and picked me up from school. I spent the whole day with her, and then she dropped me back to school, and I got on the bus and went back home.
Hmm.
And so when my eighth grade promotion came around, and like I said, I couldn't really go to my mom's house because my dad had gone to her house, and he was so mad that she was with somebody else. Like, I remember him pulling a knife on her. I remember, him like going to her house and like breaking into her car, pulling the battery cables on the car so she couldn't go anywhere. He like stalked her. And so the guy that she was with, he pretty much he got our cell phone and said, "Hey, look, you know what? we moving. So they ended up moving. Um, and my dad still wouldn't really let me go to my mom's house. Like he was okay with me, maybe like an hour or two, but anything beyond that, I couldn't go.
Wow.
And he just didn't want me around her husband. So so back to later on, later on, and I have a funny story about, not a funny story, but a story about promotion too, because that day was devastating for me. It really, really was. Um, so back to that summer between eighth and ninth grade. Actually, it was actually I was already in school. I'd already started my freshman year of high school. Already started, and we got a call from CPS saying, they had a complaint that my dad was abusive and he was sexually molesting me. So the um, social worker was scheduled to come out, and so my mom was on the phone with me. My Of course, we still had the house phone and everything at that time. So my mom called, and she's like, she talked to my dad for a little bit, and then she said, she wanted to speak with me. So I took my phone in my bedroom and was talking to her, and she says, "So you're just gonna tell the lady the truth, right? He's never touched you, has he?" And I got so silent. And she's like, "My middle name is Sheree." And she's like, and that's what my family, my whole family calls me by my middle name. And she's like, "Sheree, he's never touched you, right?" And I I couldn't say nothing. I think I just broke. And she's like, "What the heck?" She's like, "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say something?" And I'm like, I didn't know what to say. Like I don't know. And she's like, "I'm on my way." My mom was there in 30 minutes. It was so crazy because she was just like, she told my dad, she's like, "I can't believe that you touched our daughter. Like that was okay for you." And he told me before she got there, he said, "I'll deny it to my grave." He said, "I'll never tell her. I will deny it. I will deny it. I won't ever tell her that." And I really believe my mom was ready to kill my dad that night. Like she was. Instead, she took me. I went to her house and I stayed with her that night. And my stepdad ended up taking me to school in the morning. Um, he ended up taking me to school, and I stayed with her for a few days. And then the CPS lady, we had to meet the CPS worker at my dad's house, and he wasn't there. But we met the CPS worker there. My mom told me, she's just like, don't don't say anything, because in her mind it would have set off like whole this just chain of events that she didn't really want to, have to endure, have to be a part of. So me, I'm like, I'm trusting my mom at the time. I'm like, okay, like I won't say what actually happened. With He's been doing this for years now. At that time, I'm like, I was almost 14 or 14, and it had been like 3 years. And so I knew what he had done to my niece. I knew that that was real. And from then on, um, and I told you my dad had congestive heart failure. He'd had heart attacks and everything. So he was really dealing with like a lot health wise at the time. So he really did need a lot of help. And so my mom was she asked me, she said, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I wanted to leave, but I guess I didn't want to be like looked at as, this horrible girl who just,
We
left her father, and he's sick, and I felt like God didn't want me to do that, and I was gonna be a horrible person if I did that. And my dad came and picked me up. My mom called me at school. Called me at school. Got a message. Got a message. My science teacher knew some of what was going on. She didn't know everything, but she knew some of it. And she my mom called me, and I talked to her while I was at school, and she told me that my dad was going to come pick me up from school. And I don't really know how I felt about that,
yeah.
but he was coming to apologize, and he was coming to, just say that, he would never do it again, and that it just wasn't, he would never touch me. And but he still refused to ever tell my mother the truth, or anybody for that matter. Like, he never talked to anybody about it.
He was just trying to play the innocent card in a way.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Like, he, in his mind, he did no wrong.
Yeah.
So that was high school. That was at least that was my ninth grade year. Um, I remember, and then that summer, the summer between ninth and 10th grade, is when all of that stuff happened between my dad and my niece and all of that. I really, yeah, it was that summer where, yeah, because I remember pulling out my report card. I just got my report card from my ninth grade year, and I was looking at that time they had like ranking, they had class rank, and then they had like GPA, and I was in all gifted classes. So I had a 4.3 GPA, and I was ranked like number 4 in the class
So he was smart.
that year. And that was that's where I was. So um between that year, I was still living with my dad, and something happened. I can't remember what it was that made my mom come and get me again, and I ended up staying with her. I went back to talk to my dad, and he pretty much told me, "You don't do anything for me. You don't do nothing." He was so angry. He was so angry, and him being angry like that, it was like, oh no, I can't do this anymore. I can't. And my mom was trying to compromise with him, and there was no compromising. And so that day, my mom took me, unenrolled me from Cleveland Public Schools, and took me to the suburb where she was and enrolled me. And I started staying with my mom after that.
And like, can you kind of like explain that? Just how did it feel? Like just knowing that you were not going to be around your dad no more, and you're going somewhere.
It was relief. It was relief, but also sadness, because my dad had at that point taught me a lot, and I'm saying a lot because I learned how to, he had houses that he fixed up, so I learned how to, change locks on doors. I was painting. I was really self-sufficient. I was driving. um wasn't old enough to get a license yet, but I had already learned how to drive and was driving very efficiently, like on the highway, long distance trips and everything. Like, yeah. So, and that was all because of my dad. My dad taught me how to drive. And then when he wouldn't feel well some days, he would give me the car and say, hey, can you go around the corner to the store and get items and whatever? And we lived in Cleveland, Lee and Harvard area. There was a shopping plaza like right behind our little, like, right behind or right on the next block, I should say, because our street was sitting right behind it. And I would take the car, 14 years old, and he run around the corner.
And not many
It,
people can
you
say
know,
that.
I and we drove long distances. We would drive like to Arkansas and to um, remember, 1 year we had a family reunion in Texas, so we went to Arkansas for 2 weeks, and then went to Texas, and then came back, to Arkansas and stayed like another week, and then came home. So I was on all of those trips, and I drove.
Wow. That I mean, that is actually pretty cool though to be able to say that you did that at the age of 14. You were driving over
Yeah,
state
and
lines and
it was 13. Well, yeah, 13 and 14, because I'm like I was behind the wheel on the highway at 13. I remember I the first time, the very first time I got on the highway, um, my dad came to pick me up from my mom's house. My mom stayed 30 minutes away from his house, so he wasn't feeling well that day, and he wasn't, because of his heart failure and everything, and he had diabetes and he had high blood pressure and all that. So whatever was going on, he just wasn't feeling well that day, and so he came to pick me up because I had school. I was still at Collinwood, still in Cleveland at high school. Um, Came to pick me up, and he told me, "You're driving home." And I'm like, "Only way to get home is on the highway." He's like, "Yeah, you're driving home." And I'm like,
are you
he
serious?
was like, "This is the only way that you're gonna learn." And I'm like, "Okay." And my dad, he was a tyrant to the point where he yelled every single time anyone was behind the wheel. Like, he yelled. Like, I remember my mom learning how to drive. Okay, okay. I was 3 and 4 years old at the time, actually younger than that, 2 and 3 at the time, when my mom was learning how to drive. And he taught my mom how to drive. But in teaching her how to drive, he was mean, like so mean, like horrible mean.
Like what would he say?
So, like, stuff like, you dummy, you, you I told you to turn your wheel to the left, you turned your wheel to the right, you dummy. I told it was just, it was always, it was the name calling. It was intense all the time. And so even when I was learning how to drive, it was intense. So this day, I was like, "Oh, I'm about to get on the highway. Oh, I know he's about to make me nervous. I'm about to crash somewhere because he's about to really make me nervous." That day, though, he was so calm.
Didn't say a word. Just
Barely, barely. He just told me, he was so calm. He was like, "Go over to the left lane. If you want to pass, get in the left lane, and then you get back over after you've cleared the car, after you cleared the car behind you. Okay, stay over in your left lane. If you want to pass the truck, stay in the left lane, and they're gonna stay in their lane if you stay in yours. Just stay over to the left." And I'm thinking, like, what in the heck is going on? And he's like, "No, just stay to the left." Barely raised his voice, barely said anything, and I'm just like, what is happening?
it's like, is this real? It's like, is this real?
It, craziness. So by the time, like, I went to actually live with my mom, um, I mean, I knew, and my mom knew that I knew how to drive and everything. So it was just a matter of now getting me legit, you know, actually getting me a license, actually, or getting me temps and getting a license and all of that stuff. So, and it was really funny. I ended up staying with my mom, like, from that year I graduated from Rock River High School, and it was cool. Like, I loved being out there. I loved seeing different stuff. It was a culture shock, of course, because I went to predominantly black school in Cleveland, and then I ended up at this predominantly white school in the suburbs. And we called it the bubble because I'm like, really, I'm a Cleveland girl for real. Like, through and through. Like there, I this is who I am.
Yeah.
Like I'm a little bit hood and I'm a little bit saved. Just one of it's what it is.
Yeah.
And going to school out there, I was just like, what in the world what did my mom get me into? My grades fell a lot because I realized I wasn't as smart as I thought I was. Like River was a whole different dynamic, and it kind of goes back to the equity of just systems in the US. Like where you're talking about educational systems and the equity therein, it's not there. It's not present
Yeah.
because this predominantly black school, and it was big on heart and big on just um, culture and all of that. But then transferring to this white school, I remember just the academics just not being my academics weren't up to par. My English teacher was like, "You don't even know how to write a paper,"
Wow.
and I'm like, "I don't."
And
And she's like, "You can't even really write a proper paragraph," and I'm like, "I can't."
so
Really?
pretty much in a way, like to put it, is like what you were used to learning and teaching, what the lessons, they were like 2 years ahead of you guys. You
Yeah,
had to step up
yeah.
your game, like.
Especially in the gifted classes. The gifted classes were, oh my gosh, when I say so fast paced, I couldn't keep up. The only gifted class I ended up keeping was my chemistry gifted class. And I, ended up with a B average, actually like a B minus average in that class because I just I was determined to keep that one. English I let go, math I let go. I was not giving up my chemistry honors class.
Nope, you're like, I gotta keep this one. You guys can have the
So
other ones, but I'm taking this one.
I'm keeping this.
Why
Am
chemistry though?
because I wanted to go. I wanted to actually be in that field. I wanted to go into forensic chemistry.
That was your answer.
Um, that was my intended career path.
Yeah.
Um, I loved forensic science as a kid. Loved, loved, loved. Ended up going to a forensic science camp at Shawnee State after I moved with my mom. She sent me down there for like it was like a whole week for the summer. Um, and did this camp. It was so cool, it was so much fun, and that was the career path I wanted to go. I wanted to do, and ended up not doing that. Actually, went my first 2 years of college was in that field. I was a pre forensic science chemistry major, but I wasn't that smart. But I
What
wasn't that
do you
smart.
think it was more just you were kind of just dealing with the just everything changing around you, or was it?
It was a lot of that, and my father at that time, like by the time I got to college, my father had passed away. He died when I was 17. Actually, I was 16. I was just about to turn 17. He died on Martin Luther King Day of 2004.
Wow.
And I remember that day, it was crazy because I was with one of my high school classmates, and um, my mom and my stepdad were having like a lot of issues. They were having a lot of issues at the time, and I just wanted to be out of the house. Like, just get me out of here. And my one of my classmates in high school was just like, "Hey, you can hang with me for the day," and I'm like, "Yes, like, get me away from home. Just let me go." And I didn't want to call my dad. I had just seen him in church the day before, and he was talking some crazy nonsense about how he was going to change up. Like, I left out a lot. I'm just going to say that. My dad had bought a house in West Memphis, Arkansas, and he put my name on the deed. My name was on the deed to that house. And then he bought a house here in Cleveland, which we ended up moving from my childhood home to a newer house, out a little bit further out on the outskirts of Cleveland. Not necessarily in the suburbs, but like right in the city limits. And that house he put my mom's name on.
Hmm.
So he did not put his wife's name on that house at all. My siblings were very, very, very upset about that because When he died, that house automatically went to my mom.
What about the other house? The head?
The other house in West Memphis, it was mine. Mine. And my siblings felt like he like just left their mom out, which he was still married to, he was still married to my stepmom at that time. But she wasn't really a strong-willed personality individual who would have stood up to her kids. And I felt like her kids really were coming for money as opposed to anything else. Like my siblings, they were coming for money because they couldn't stand my dad. I don't think any of them could. And my my stepmom also had a very big like nervous disorder. Like she had a lot of nerves in her face that would cause her to constantly look like she was chewing,
Yeah.
and she had to have this special medication come from like England, and that was like $500 every single cycle, and insurance would not pay for it because it was an experimental drug, but that would calm her down so that she would be normal because otherwise she was in constant her jaw was in constant motion like she was chewing. And if she didn't have that medication, you knew, right?
So you have.
So my dad actually worked to
You want to turn on the light?
oh right. I didn't realize how dark I was getting. Hold on. I didn't realize how dark I was. Okay. There's a light.
I was like, I don't want your eyes to start getting tired.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good call out. So yeah, so my dad would work. He worked, to make sure she had that medication or whatever, and then he would give the money to my brother to get her medication. Like my brother would have to send off for it and everything, and get it delivered. And so, right before my father died, he gave my brother the money to get his mother's medication, and my brother did not. We did not know that my brother was using again. He was he had been a drug he'd been addicted in the past, and we didn't know that um he had started using again. And so he took that money and did not order her medication, and we didn't find that out until after my dad passed away.
Wow.
So like I felt like I was still in touch with my dad all while I was in high school, living with my mom and everything. I was still in touch with him. I would still go to church on Sunday. Still try to show up at church on Tuesday and Friday. Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. Depending on what that looked like. And I I don't really regret a lot of those that last year. I don't, just because I was so happy to be away from the constant of him.
You didn't have that
I was
that
very happy.
tension built on you anymore. It was just,
It was easier
yeah.
with my mom, you know. And I was a little bit freer. I could, do activities. I could, go to friends' house. Just be a regular teenager. You know,
And kind
people.
of just explain that for a little bit. How was that just being able to just have that freedom, just to be able to hang out with people and
Yeah. Like with my dad, I had to sneak and do things. Like I remember like sneaking to like get his phone and call a friend, and then would have to hang up in a hurry, or I would have to like try to call a friend like early, like in the morning, so that while he wasn't home, I had a friend send me a card in the mail, and it was addressed to me, of course. She had my address and she sent it to me. This is a friend from school. And we're preteens, so it was nothing. It was just a cutesy little card or whatever. My dad made me open it in front of him and read it out loud.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. It was never, there was no privacy, like, and I felt like he thought that I was like gonna get away from him. And it's crazy because like all my other siblings, they played sports, they did all of that. I was not allowed to play any sports. I was not allowed to be a part of a band. I couldn't do anything.
You were completely
Nothing.
locked down.
And so then moving with my mom and now having like this newfound freedom, I could go outside. I could, you know, call a friend and say, hey, like, what are you doing after school? Or what are you doing on Saturday? Can we hang out or stuff like that? It was just like, it was a whole new world. But then I'm coming into a school where I don't know anybody.
Yeah.
I didn't know anybody. But my first day of school, my one friend, of course, I stick out like a sore thumb because I'm brown. Everybody knows I'm new. Never seen me before. So they know I'm new. So I'm walking up the hallway, and all of a sudden I hear a shriek. It's like, ah! I'm like, what is happening? And my friend is running to me like, it's another sister in the building. And I'm just like, so she proceeds to introduce herself and, tell me, about everybody else who's not many of us in the building, you know, and it was cool. Like those that was my tribe. Those were, I hung out with international club, and we had a girl group that would get us out of class like once a month for like an hour or so, and just to talk and you know talk about our adjustments and things like that. Just we it was cool. Like I just developed those relationships, and those people like I still have contact with over Facebook and things like that. So yeah, I remember going to a friend's house, and I went to her house on a Tuesday night, and I had never experienced this. I lived in a house in Cleveland, but my mom lived in an apartment where we were. And my friend, she had this huge house, like massive. And I don't know what her family did for a living. I have no idea. But it was like a Tuesday night, and they're like, "Yeah, we're just gonna throw some steaks on the grill." And I'm thinking, like, what?
Come again?
You're gonna fire up a grill on a It's a Tuesday. Like, there's nothing special about this Tuesday. It's They're like, "Yeah, we're just gonna throw some steaks on the grill." And Tisha, do you want to stay for dinner? And I'm like, heck yeah, I want to stay for dinner because I need to see what this is like a Tuesday.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy to me. So I'm like, I found those things to be good, but I want to talk about like my mental development. Like, didn't realize that. Oh no, after my father passed away, I did ask my mom. I said, hey, like, because I felt like a depression. I didn't know how to feel.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask you, like, afterwards. Like, just after it was all said and done, he had passed, how were you, mentally, what was going on there?
Yeah, I didn't really know what I was feeling. I just knew I wasn't right. I knew something just didn't feel right. So I told my mom, I said, hey, 17, I think I need to see a therapist. And at the time, I was talking about like really having I was very into government, student government. I was into politics. I was really, really, even still, like I'm passionate about, I'm passionate about certain things, right? But then, that was going to be the course of my future. You know, I wanted to go into crime scene investigation and kind of kind of wiggle my way maybe into city government and things like that. So my mom told me at the time, was like, no, I don't think that's a good idea. And I don't think a therapist is a good idea because think about it, in the Black community, um, therapy is was very taboo, very taboo. We didn't talk about sending people to see a therapist or sending anybody to see. We didn't talk about that stuff at
So,
all.
so in a way, like if the listener's not quite understand our watcher, you're like you would pretty much say like weak. You would make your status make you kind of look like you're weak.
Yes, yes. And what my mom thought was that it was going to make me look crazy and unstable
Yeah.
and mentally incapable. So she was just like, no, I don't think that's a good idea. So I didn't realize, you know, in my from that time on until like my early 20s, I started being very rebellious. Like, you can't tell me anything. I'm going to do what I want. Like, being like so much of a risk taker. I didn't really know how to form formative relationships, um, formative friendships, even though I did have friends and I still have friends from that era. I have two friends for sure from that time in my life. With girls, with women, I was always really shaky with friendships. And I didn't know why. I didn't understand it. Um, and I don't know if it was a challenge to me or if I just wanted to be more like them because I saw, how they use their voice and I really wasn't doing that.
Yeah.
I can't really say what that disconnect was. All I know is that I didn't know how to really be a good friend.
Because I mean, how I see it is you weren't around it enough. You don't know. You were isolated from it all, so it was kind of like when you
Right.
got to that point, it was harder to adjust to it, how to react to certain things.
So, I mean, I remember I was very impulsive at that time, very, very impulsive. And then my mom drops the bomb on me, and I come home for Christmas, and she's like, I haven't been feeling well. I don't know what's going on. But I went to the doctor, they took blood work and everything, and they're going to get back to me. The day after Christmas, we're sitting down, we're in, just at the kitchen table. And she gets a phone call from the doctor. Doctor is telling her what's going on. And she's like, oh, and she's like, kind of like, bust out laughing. And I'm just like, what is going on? So then she says, hey, so I got some news. I'm like, okay. She's like, so I'm not sick at all. You're not sick. Okay, so what's going on? I'm pregnant. Oh. And at this point, I'm 19. I'd grown up pretty much as an only child. I was my mom's only child.
Well, how
So
old how old how old was your mom now at this?
my mom at that time she was 34.
So she's at a normal age now.
Yeah. At that time she's 34. And so I'm thinking, what in the heck? Actually no. No, she just turned 35. Because this was right after yeah, I think she just turned 35. So the age that I'm at now. So she's like, yeah, I'm pregnant. And, June, my little brother comes. And I'm like, what in the heck? Like, I'm now 20 years old, with a sibling,
Yeah,
you know?
you're like, whoa, what's
Yeah,
going on?
20 years old with a sibling. And that feeling for me, I don't even know really how I felt. I knew I loved him and I adored having a baby, at home. I took him everywhere with me. My mom would come. It was so funny. Like, she would uh, be so tired. She'd come and hand him off to me and like, here, like, you take him. And I'm like, No problem.
Okay.
All good. All good. I got him, you know. And I stayed with my mom up until he was like maybe like 8 or 9 months. And I remember like being I very, very rebellious at that time because I felt like, I had been away at college for like 2 years. So I'm grown. I can, do what I want. Like just because I stay with mom. What? Mom? So what is she gonna I was like, what is she gonna say to me? Like I've been away from her supervision for 2 years now. What can she really say? And yeah, that didn't fly so well with mother. So she and I really ended up like really at odds. We really ended up at odds. And I will say this about my mom, she's gotten a lot better now, but at that time she was dealing with postpartum depression. She was dealing with my little brother's father being such a jerk and being just he was doing things that he wasn't supposed to be doing behind her back. And so she was really dealing with all of that. And I didn't know
Yeah.
a lot of what she was dealing with. I never really heard of postpartum depression. I didn't know what the heck that was. But she had it really, really bad. And I just made it worse. I just made it worse. But I didn't know. And so she and I like really, really bumped heads. Like really, really. I remember incident that we had. It was bad, like to the point where I called the police on my mom.
Were you guys like were
And
fighting or?
yeah, she had taken the keys to my car. Um, because of course she gave me the car. So she took the keys to my car and told me just to get out of her house and don't come back. And I'm like, where the heck am I supposed to go? And I don't have a car. Am I walking? What am I doing? What am I doing? And she ended up giving me the keys back to my car. But as I was leaving, like she got really, really, really so mad. And this level of anger in her, it wasn't normal. Like her anger had grown. And I can only imagine that a lot of what she was dealing with was residual from what my dad had done too.
All that backed up, piled up stuff that she held in for a long
Yeah,
time finally
yeah.
surfaced. Yeah.
So she locked me out of the house completely, no keys, no nothing, and it's the dead of winter. Dead of winter. Well, I'm like, after what did I do? Oh, I was working third shift, and I told her that I was going to work, but actually I went to hang out with a friend. I called out work and went to hang out with a friend, and I came back the next morning like I had been to work. And I had hung out with my cousin too, but my cousin told my mom
Oh,
that I was with her. Snitch. She told my mom.
slipped up.
I don't think it was a slip up. I think my cousin did that on purpose. I
Oh,
really do. Because my cousin was one of those, I felt like she was always like really kind of jealous of me and my mom's relationship. And so she would always like tell my mom things that I was doing or tell my mom, stuff. I think she started a rumor that I was pregnant during college and told my mom. It was all kinds of stuff. Really all kinds. Told my mom that I got an abortion. Like just stuff.
just because she was jealous of what you
Just
had.
stuff. And so my mom's already like believing her that, this stuff is happening. Um, so she's like she's like so angry to the point where like she doesn't even want to talk to me. She doesn't talk to me at all. She just get out of my house. So when she locked me out of the house, I ended up calling the police, and I ended up calling the police, and I hung up. And the police, pinged the call, of course, and found me anyway. They were driving up the street, but the crazy part is they would have never found us had my mom not been in the trunk of my car. She was in the trunk of my car, pulling everything out. She had jumped in the trunk and was kicking my back seat in.
What?
And as she was doing that, the police was coming down the street.
And they
and they
they
saw
captured. Yeah.
her. And when they saw her, of course, like she saw them, she jumps out of the trunk and she runs in the house. She locks the door. And the police, of course, pull up like, hey, what is going on? What is happening? And I tell them, I proceed to tell them, hey, this is what's happening. This is what's going on. Um, and I had some scarring on my hand because I was trying to open the door to the house, and she like hit my hand with this metal brush, like bad, 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 bad. So of course the police are like, hey, like you guys got to figure this out, or you got to leave, give her the keys to her car back, and just go wherever you got to go. So I ended up going to my uncle's house and I stayed with him for like 6 months. Reconciled with my mom. Um, she actually came to look at my first apartment with me, and I was living on my own for a while, but I got tangled up with guys. I was missing something. I wanted to feel this love that I didn't get to with my dad. And by this time, I'm like, I was still in church and everything. I was still in church, but the connection to church was just,
Because of
mm,
that relationship. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. My connection with church just went completely south. Like it was, I really wasn't there for the relationship with God. I was there because it was the thing for me to do,
Yeah.
you know?
You had to be there. You
Um,
didn't have an option.
yeah. And yeah, like at that time I just really started like kind of going on this trip where I'm dealing with guys that I know I'm not supposed to be dealing with. I'm talking to dudes and they're taking advantage of me, like full advantage of me. Like when I say taking advantage, it was like, oh, you got money, oh, you got a place of your own, oh, you got a car, oh, can I get your car? Can I do is And it was something that I had never experienced before because I didn't see this happening.
You just had that hole in your heart and you're trying to fill it.
I'm trying to feel it because I don't know how. I really don't know, who. I'm just thinking that, some man is gonna come along and he's gonna love me and something's gonna, come of that. And, I also had this, I think, fantasy of, oh, Prince Charming is gonna come and whisk me away.
We get brainwashed into
Not,
that.
you know, not understanding that that just was not gonna happen. So I really got tangled up with a lot of that stuff. And professionally, I suffered for that. I really, like professionally, I think I worked my first job out of college. I worked at a group home. Um, and then next, like I went to like call centers. I was working that for a little bit, but I was always developing like those skills because I was always a public speaker. Like, of course, I had to do like when you have to do like church speeches for like Easter and Christmas and just conventions and stuff. That's what I did.
It's a normal thing to do.
7 years, 7 years old, I had this whole page dissertation almost that I learned word for word, word for word. Okay, I was 7, word for word. Okay, it was about a 15, not 15 minutes. It was about 10-minute speech, and I got a standing ovation for that. I'll never forget that night. That night was amazing.
That's pretty awesome, though. I mean, to be at 7 and to memorize a whole page.
Yeah, that night was amazing. But the, anything other than like, so I always did, and I did like public speaking in high school. So I did like I did forensics in high school. I did speech and debate in high school. Was part of student congress, things like that. So that was always something that was there. So I take those skills and kind of transfer them to like every position, I'm in, whether I'm on the phone or whether, whatever.
Yeah.
So like I never went back to school for that chemistry degree. It was just too much. And then ended up dropping out of college because it was just expensive. Like I couldn't pay for it,
Yeah.
you know? And I remember people telling me like, you don't have to go to this college, go to another college. And I was actually offered a full ride to Cleveland State and I wouldn't take it. And I listened to other people too, which really flawed my decision. Why didn't I take it? Because I would have been able to graduate and have that degree and, be everything that I, wanted to be, but I didn't. And it was because I had left credits on the table at the other college, not understanding that I really could have used that degree and gone back and, gotten those credits towards another degree. I didn't I didn't take that into consideration at all.
It was
Yes, I was going to have to start over at the moment, but I could have started over and, finished what was intended for me, and I didn't.
and none of it was adding up to you. You weren't thinking about that at all.
It wasn't adding up to me, and I'm like, it didn't add up to my mom either. My mom was, when I say I always looked to her for approval, um, and permission. That was probably a big flaw because I was always like wanting her approval. So a lot of times, especially like as it became like more and more rebellious, I would lie to her because I didn't want to disappoint her. I would lie to her because I thought that saying the truth would be worse.
Yeah, and and really, your mom was everything to you.
Yeah, yeah. And I didn't want to disappoint her. I didn't want to, be the daughter that just, you know, was just
You wanted to
making
make
her
her proud.
sad and
You
everything.
wanted her to be proud of
Yeah.
you, no matter what.
I ended up being that daughter anyway because I had a situation where my license was suspended, driver's license was suspended because I got into a car accident, didn't have car insurance, and my mom was with me because I ran out of gas on the highway,
Oh
and I
no.
ran out of gas. Police, come up behind me, run my plates. It's like, hey, you were driving this car, and I said, yeah, I was driving it, and they're like, well, you can step out of the car and put your hands behind your back, and I'm just like, I'm really getting arrested. Yeah, you're getting arrested because you were driving under suspension. And my mom was with me. And I know that that hurt her heart because she's like, this is my child, my daughter getting arrested. And to her, it don't matter what the arrest was for, I was getting arrested. It didn't matter,
Yeah,
you know? So just knowing that that disappointment was there and that I had caused it, ooh,
that
that hurt my heart.
yeah, that hit.
Oh, that hurt my heart. Especially knowing what we had gone through and knowing the life that we've had to endure and what we've, come through and understanding what that was and where we were then, bad. So I pretty much stayed away from my mom for like a couple of years because I had a guy that she didn't like. She hated this dude, really hated this dude because I didn't find out until years later that she had caught him with another woman
Oh no.
in my car.
In your own car?
In my car. He had taken my car and she caught him with this girl in my car. And she didn't tell me that though. My mom didn't tell me at all. I just knew she hated she couldn't stand him. And I didn't know why. I didn't find this out till my son. I have with somebody else, of course, but I didn't find out until my son was like 5 years old why she couldn't stand this guy.
Your son
And
was the
I
one that came clean and told you?
No, 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 no. My son's father actually told me because I introduced him to my ex boyfriend's sister, and they worked together for a little bit, and so they knew each other. And so they would hang out, sometimes. And his sister ended up telling my son's father that my mom had caught her brother with another woman in my car.
Was it like Like at work or something, they were all working together. Or...
Yeah, I think they were probably, I know I was in, I believe I was in Alabama at the time because I had taken a job in Alabama. And, they hang out because, we're family. She called him bruh,
Yeah,
that was, sis. And, we were all connected. I mean, I always believed that family was about, who felt good to your soul rather than who was related to you or who was blood related to you.
amen.
So I was always about, my friends hanging out or, you know, just connecting people. And they got along really well. I didn't even think anything of it until my son's father told me. He was like, "Yeah, so what ended up happening with your mom?" Because I had told him that I had suspicions of that, and I don't know if he asked her about it, but he came back and confirmed it. He was like, "Yeah, she did catch him with another woman in your car, and she just never told me."
Because she didn't want to get you hurt. Or
I'm like, I was already hurt because I didn't know why she was so upset with him.
yeah,
It was kind of like a flip of a switch. Like she didn't tell me. I do also know that he made her even madder because I started dealing with him. I had broken up with him and I started talking to him again. And he was on the run. He was on the run, had a federal warrant, and he brought like not SWAT, but like the whole like crime units to my house because they thought that he was with me
jeez.
and I was staying with my mom. So
So they kicked in the door and everything, and
our whole house was surrounded. Thankfully, they didn't break down the door. They just knocked on the door and said, "Hey, open the door." Came in the house, checked the house. Is he here? And I'm like, "No, he's not here." And they're like, "Do you know that he has federal warrants?" And I'm like, "I knew, but I was like, he does? Like, he has warrants?" And they're like, "Yeah, he has federal warrants. So if we catch you with him, you're going to jail too because now you know." And I'm like,
like, damn
"Crap."
it.
And my mom is like, "I can't believe that you're still talking to him. I can't believe that you're still dealing with him. I can't believe it." I'm just like,
Just,
I don't know what you want me to tell you. Like, it's what it is. So I ended up moving out. He ended up going to jail. They ended up catching up with him. He ended up going to jail, and I was still with him. Like I was still, being that girlfriend, writing him and sending him money in jail. And I was just like, this is not like how I envisioned my life at all.
yeah,
I did not envision this happening. But I didn't realize too that a lot of what I was dealing with was residual. A lot of what I was dealing with was just me trying to figure out. I was really kind of going through identity crisis. I was like, why the heck am I here? It really went back to how I got here in the first place. I really had to come to terms with I was here and whatever that purpose is, it was going to be revealed and I was just going to have to just just live the best life that I could in given the circumstances that I was in. I didn't understand a lot of myself. I didn't. And it took me a while to actually get there. Once I did, and once I really started finding my voice, I just kind of was like, you know what? This is not for me. I ended up breaking up with that guy. Um, I went to Mexico with one of my best friends that year, and my boyfriend was very mad at me for going because he felt like, oh, you're leaving me and you're, going to go to Mexico. And my best friend was a guy too, but he was gay. And we were meeting, I was meeting him and his boyfriend in Mexico. And I'm like, yes, I am going. I'm out. And my boyfriend was like, what? Like you're leaving? Yes, I am. And I left. I went and I sat on that beach. And this is where I realized the power of your tongue. But I already knew it. I already knew it. I knew that there's power in the tongue. I knew that, manifestation is real. I knew that the energies and the powers above were real. I knew all of that. Whether it's God, or whether you believe in the universe, or whatever you believe in, that is real. You know.
Well,
So
connected to the same source anyway. But
I look. I sat on that beach and I prayed a prayer. I sat on that beach and I prayed a prayer. I said, God, I don't want this anymore. Please remove him from my life. Don't kill him, but just remove him. I need him gone from my life because I I don't know. Like I'm attached to this man and I don't want to be attached to this man. This man has caused me hurt. He's brought me pain. He's not meaning any good by me. I need to be done with this. Sure enough, I got back to Cleveland and I'm calling his phone. It's going straight to voicemail. I'm like, what is happening? Wait a minute. Okay, no problem. So then I'm like, huh, is he? I haven't heard from him. Oh, okay, no problem. And I get a collect call. This is a call from Cuyahoga Correctional Facility from,
mm,
and I'm like, well, what do you, look at this? Oh, oh, yeah, I got picked up, such and such. And I'm like, okay, all right, okay. So then at that time, I'm still stupid. I'm still taking his phone calls, still taking his phone calls, still taking his phone calls. It was so crazy. I literally heard a voice. You asked me to do something for you and I did it. Why are you going back? And the next time he called me, I told him, I said, do not call me again. I will not take any more of your phone calls. And of course, he's like, are you serious? Very serious. Don't call me anymore. And he was shocked, like, what? Like his whole like demeanor on the phone was, I can't believe that you really are saying, no, I mean that. Do not call me again. Call your sisters, call your mom, call whoever, just don't call me. And that was the end of that relationship.
and would you say right then and there was that the beginning of that the empower you're starting to feel, or
I think I started to feel it beforehand, but I understood the assignment.
yeah, that's what I was saying.
Yes.
You were starting to understand.
Yeah,
You're starting to see something.
yeah. I really started to understand, and I'm like, oh, after that, I'm like, oh, I felt kind of powerful. I'm like Cardi B, kind of like, oh, I feel powerful, you know, like, I really felt like, and that was probably the first time I really felt like really good. I'm like, yes, I can move on, and I don't have to be like burdened by stuff that I don't want to be burdened by. Then I'm like, the test came. Oh, the test definitely came because that summer I ended up getting pregnant with my son, and his father and I were not really in a committed relationship, and we just weren't in a committed relationship, and so navigating that even was difficult because I picked up and left. I was out of here. I was gone. I was like, I'm not coming back to the city. I hadn't even told my mom I was pregnant.
Wow.
I just left. But he begged me to come back, and so I ended up coming back, and I had my child here. I stayed with my mom, um, and that relationship was tumultuous because I felt like I really didn't have like the support that I needed from him, and this was somebody else. I didn't really pick men well. I didn't, I didn't pick men well,
Just because of what you grew up around,
and
you
and
didn't
I'm
have the
like, and I
right figure to.
Yeah, I'm like, I really didn't. My mom was saying she thought that I would have learned from her how to, what not to do. And I'm like, you do realize that doesn't, that's not how that works, right? Like, you're telling me don't pick sorry men because you picked sorry men, but what's been around me,
Yep, and that's what you're
you
used to
know?
being around.
So I don't know. I know my mom was upset about, that, but I thought that, my son was gonna, really bring us closer together, which it has definitely over the last like few years. My mom and I ended up not really speaking to each other for like 5 years because of a fight we got into when my son was a child, when my son was a baby. He was a baby, like a year, not even a year old. He was probably like, I'd say maybe 11. No, no, he was a year because he was walking by that time. He was about a year old. And my mom and I got into another fight. Um, and this time it was really really bad. Um, and I really didn't speak to her for like 5 years. Like we spoke, we would see each other every now and again, but mm, we really didn't have a lot to. We didn't talk a lot.
Relationship was not there. It was
Yeah, it wasn't present. And so my brother asked me. My brother, who is 20 years younger than me, at the time he asked me, he said, well, what's going on with you and mom? Like, why don't you and mom get along? And I started to tell him my grandmother and my aunt were sitting on the porch when I was talking to him, and they didn't like what I was saying.
because you were telling them the truth, and they
Yeah,
didn't
I was
know
telling him my truth. And I'm like, and regardless of, who was listening, this was my truth, you know? And I told my mom later, I was like, this is my truth to tell. Like, you don't get to strip me from that anymore. She was really like upset about that. Like me saying that to her is almost like me disrespecting her and saying, you don't get to tell my story for me again. You don't get to tell anything. You can say what you want to say, what your truth is, but this is my truth and this is how I feel. You don't get to tell what that feels like to me. And I really kind of credit my brother for really, making that happen with me and my mom, or actually, really pulling us back together because he wasn't really too he wasn't too happy, I should say, with how my mom was treating me and how she talked about me to him. He didn't like that. And some things ended up happening. Oh, that year, my son's father lost his dad. I want to talk about that man really quick because that man was the first father figure for real that I've had in life. And my son's father didn't have a good relationship with his dad up until maybe like a month or so before his dad passed away. And his relationship with his dad was always up and down. So he told me like a year prior, maybe like a year and a half prior, that he didn't want me talking to his dad. My son's father told me that he did not want me talking to his father. He did not want me to speak to him. Um, he was friends with me on Facebook. He was friends. We had had each other's phone numbers. I invited him to my kid's birthday party. Um, he came to my son's fourth birthday party because I invited him. And afterwards, I would post like a picture of my son, and then he would comment on it. And when he would comment on it, it would make my son's father so angry because their relationship was up and down. So my son's father told me, if you're loyal to me, if you are with me, then you would respect my wishes and not talk to my father. And so I did. So probably the next April, my son's birthday comes around, and he comes out the blue and says, "Mom, where's my grandpa?" And I'm like, he's like, "I want to talk to grandpa. Can you call him?" I called him. Sure did. I called him. I said, "Hey, your grandson wants to talk to you." And he's like, "Oh." And my son gets on the phone and has a whole conversation. Say, "Hey, your grandpa, like, how are you? What are you doing? I want to come over." He's having a full fledged conversation with his grandpa. And I'm thinking, I'm like, why did I cut this man off? Like, what was the point of that? It didn't make any sense. So from there, I took my son to see his grandfather. He saw him, they got to hang out, and my son has other brothers too from his father. So I had all three of the boys with me and went to go see their grandfather. You know,
Yeah.
I went, and their father didn't know that I was going, and so he was kind of upset. Like, "Oh, you went and you didn't tell me that you were going." And then, from there I started having conversations with his father. And his father was so sweet. He really, really was. And to me, at least, we would sit on the phone for hours and just talk because I felt like I had a dad.
Yeah, this is your real, you get the real feeling for it now.
Yeah,
This is what
it
you're
was
supposed to
it
have
was
all along.
it was so raw and it was so real, and I felt so loved. I felt like really like that emotion of, this is, father figure that I'm talking to. And man, so probably like that, maybe September, his dad comes, to our house. He just said, "I wanted to see you all, so I'll be there." He called me, said, "Hey, I'm gonna come over because I want to see you all." And I was like, "Well, the boys aren't here." And he was like, "Oh, okay." He was like, "No problem." He's like, "Well, I was in the neighborhood and I'm gonna come." And he and his wife actually came to the house. And I came downstairs first because I told my son's father, I said, "Hey, your dad is on his way over here." He said, "Huh?" "So your dad is on his way to our house?" And he's like, "Really?" "Yes, he is." And he's like, "Did you invite him?" "No, I didn't invite him, but I welcome, you know? And he came and they sat downstairs and they talked. Because we lived in an apartment building that didn't have an elevator, so he couldn't actually come in the house because he had COPD really bad. So he couldn't make it up the steps. So we talked, you know, they actually talked and mended some fences, and I was very happy about that because November his father passed away.
Wow.
And I remember being very I remember being very, very disappointed, angry. I was angry at my son's father for a long time behind that because I'm like, you kept my son away from his grandfather. Like, that was the only grandfather he had,
Yeah.
and you kept him away from him because I don't know if you were being selfish or you just being. So that was another emotion that I had to eventually get away from my son's father to really, go start going to counseling. I started going to grief counseling after that because I felt like it was my loss. And my son's father was kind of selfish about it. Like, that was my dad. And I'm like, yeah, it was your dad, but you also told me that you wouldn't even go to your dad's funeral if he died. And you said that in June and your dad was dead in November. So I was kind of like, I don't want to hear any of that. I don't want to, we're not, nope, I don't want to hear none of it because you kept them away from us. And you told me, he was like, "Well, that was your choice." And he kind of started putting it off on me. And I was like, yeah, I'm not,
No.
we can't do this. I ended up splitting up from my son's father. But after I split up from him, I felt like everything really started to grow for me. Like, really, I really started to understand purpose a lot more. Just for myself and just for my life and where I'm planning to go. Like, things just really, the tests do come, don't get me wrong, the tests definitely come, but I see more of why and what I guess I need to focus on. I needed to really focus on me because I was letting men really kind of dictate where and how my life was flowing and how my life was going. I really did a lot of that and didn't realize that that's what I was doing.
Yeah. You were starting to see the bigger picture. It was becoming more clear to you.
Very crystal clear, especially like feeling all the betrayals and all of the things that happened. Like my son's father proposed to me, and then I found out that he was talking to other women like a month and a half later. We'd been together for like a year and a half at that point. You proposed to me, and then stuff is happening. And all of a sudden, I'm getting all of these signs like thrown at me, like "Don't do that," red flag, red flag, red flag, red flag.
Like, hey, we're back.
Because
We're back to this again. I'm saving you once again.
and I'm like, I'm really and the crazy part about that was that I was blindsided. Like I didn't realize that he felt certain ways or he felt certain things. I didn't know. Completely blindsided by the fact that this stuff was going on and that he felt certain ways and that but then I started to really see the patterns and I'm just like, look, like it's time for me to go. I got to get out of here. I have to go.
And then how did it go afterwards? After it was off.
I've been, and I won't say I think I've been happy, but I've definitely no, I'm gonna say I've been happy because I think happiness is just the condition of your mind. Um, it's been peaceful, definitely, because we had some very tumultuous incidences, very much so, and it was built on trauma, like the traumas that I had, the traumas that he's had. When those kind of start to collide, and you never really fixed them, you've never really gotten over them, you've never got not even gotten over them, because I don't really think that you get over a lot of things. I think you learn to live with them. Like grief is one of those things that you don't get over, you just kind of learn to live with, you know um me, I ended up leaving professionally. I had this position. My son was probably about, he was a little, almost 2 at the time, and I had gotten into this job where they'd offered me. It was kind of like it was a marketing company. They offered me a position in Alabama, Birmingham. And I didn't really want to go to Alabama. I don't like Alabama as a state, so I was like, no, I don't want to go. But I was like, this is a good opportunity for me. And so I was asking my son's father, I was saying, hey, do you think we could, you know, at the time I was living in a house, I was living in a huge house. It was like 5 bedrooms. And I was like, what the heck am I going to do with 5 bedrooms? It's just me and my son. But it was cheap. And so I was like, I'm just here.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, like, do you think you can move in with me, help me pay the bills and whatever? And he told me he didn't think he could help me out.
Then boom,
I'm
it's
like, okay.
popping in now.
You said what?
You said your signs were starting to click right there.
Yeah. And so I'm like, okay. So I was like, you know what? There's nothing for me here. I need to go. And he was saying, he thought that I was talking about him. No, I'm not talking about you. I'm not talking about you. I said, there's nothing for me here. I thought career wise, like I need to go and build up my skills and get my education and just build, and this job was going to allow me to do that. And he didn't really understand that. He thought I was rejecting him. No, I'm not rejecting you. I'm just like, ugh, you can't help me. So I got to help myself.
Yeah.
And I took off. But he told me, he said, I left my son here because, and I thought, leaving my son in Cleveland, he has people. He has 3 grandmothers. He's got my grandmother, his dad's mom, my mom, and then his dad. So you have 4 people that all can have a hand in taking care of my child while I'm away. And so I ended up leaving. I left for like 2 years. Almost not even 2 years, it was like a year and a half, honestly. And in that year and a half, my son's father had come to Alabama, had proposed to me, and we were starting to, build this life. And then all of a sudden, out the clear blue sky, everything that he was doing was literally dropped in my lap. And I say dropped in my lap because you see how we're on the computer right now. If I just put my computer in snooze mode or send it to sleep, when it pops back up, everything that's on my computer is going to be there, right?
Yep.
He was using my laptop,
Oh,
and all the messages that he had were right there as soon as I opened it up. Very inappropriate messages, and I'm just like, what? Why?
and but
That
what
night.
I see out of it though is in that moment, like that inner voice, God, what do you
Mhm.
want to call it, was saying, "Okay, I can't reach you anymore. You're not getting in here. So I'm gonna have to show you."
I'm gonna have to show you. Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna have to show you. And I'm like, I feel like that's happened in like all of my relationships where I have to literally, because I'm too nice. I give people chance after chance after chance after chance. And even still, like, I might be doing my own thing or into my stuff and professionally trying to build and put us in a better place and things, because I'm always the one thing that my dad did teach me is freaking independence. You know, like I told you, I was working on houses with him, and I learned to change freaking locks on doors, and I learned to paint, and I learned to twist a screwdriver and drive a nail. Those were things that I knew how to do. I didn't necessarily need a man for those things.
Yeah,
So um, I didn't think that I didn't think that he would be doing things like that. I definitely didn't. And so it had to be literally dropped in my lap because I trusted him wholeheartedly. And I wanted that trust. I wanted that. And it didn't happen. So me leaving him, when I left him, I left everything. I was like, here, the apartment, I'll find another one. You can have all the furniture, literally the pots and the pans. Only thing I want is I just want my clothes.
that's it.
That's it. And I left everything and started all over. And I know he was probably really hurt by that, but I was just like, I want out. I've had enough. I want out. And yeah, I got out. I got out. It's been, and I'm gonna say that every relationship that I've had, I've really grown from, definitely. And right now, it's really about just getting to the path that I want to be on. If that includes, a husband or whatever later, fine. But right now I have my son, and it's just, the two of us just kind of, you know, finding our way. Last year, I saw my aunt take her last breath, and she passed away with COVID, and she was only like 53. And so life to me is death has, I would say this, death has changed me in ways that I'll never recover from. And I understand that more so now.
Are you saying,
Um,
like, can you kind of explain that a little bit more? Just in this case, I don't understand.
um, I've lost like a lot of people the last 5 years, and that was starting with my son's grandfather, and the next year, um, my cousin passed away. He had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and when I found out he even had cancer, it was already stage 4. And but I feel like God allowed him to stay here long enough to try to get his house in order. He'd gone through a lot, just the last year of his life. His wife left him, but he was still grateful. You know, the epitome of faith in this man. Like, he always talked about, how he was in a position, and he was in the position that he was in just to tell people about God, and how he just wanted everyone to just know that, God is real, and just, and God is faithful. And I understood that plight with him.
And then,
I
like,
came back from Alabama and he was sick already, and he hadn't told anybody. He didn't tell me for a year that he was sick.
because he didn't want people to be focused on him, worried, yeah.
Right. But he honestly thought that he didn't have long. Like, it was already stage 3, so he thought he only had like 6, 7 months. He ended up living 2 years.
Gotta give him extra time.
So yeah. So he was up and moving around, and driving and all kinds of stuff. Like, he really was, making it, like, really living with it for real. Um, well, when he knew that he wasn't coming back home, he was steady setting things in motion. And then when his wife left, he was able to kind of switch things around and make sure that his daughter was okay. His oldest daughter, who was actually taking care of him, make sure that she was okay. Even though, and I was saying, and I'm always going to say, like, karma is, this world is so karmic. It's going to come back to get you. Like, whatever you put out there, it's going to come back. When he passed away, his wife, like, went to court and contested his will and took everything from my cousin except for the car. Because he had set up in his will where, you know, his children would get a certain amount of money, they would get pension and all of that stuff. He literally had set all of that up. And what was so crazy is the lawyer that set it up didn't advise him that he should have gotten a trust instead of a will. And so he went with the will, and she went to court and contested the will. And because they were still legally married, she was able to get everything.
Dang.
But my cousin was still, like, he was so influential to me. He was, oh my gosh, I spent so much time with him in his last days, and to then lose him, summer 2019, um, that was like a, that was a, that was, whew, that was a lot. Um, that was kind of the start of me and my mom mending too, because I was saying, like, I'm losing too many people. I'm just losing too many people. His father, my son's grandfather, was unexpected. We weren't expecting to lose him that soon. And when he passed away, my mom lived right around the corner from him, where their house was literally 2 streets over. And I left grandpa's house and I went to my mom's house. My mom was not at home, but my brother, my little brother's older brother, who I also call my brother, he's my heart. I've known him since he was 9 years old. So, we grew up together pretty much. So I call him my brother. He's my stepbrother. Um, he opened the door and he's like, "What's wrong?" And I'm just a wreck. And I'm saying, "Where's my mother?" And he's like, "Mom's not here." And I'm like, "I need to talk to my mom." And he's like, "I don't know when she's coming home." And my mom was still, like, very apprehensive. She was kind of like, "What is she doing there? Why is she in my house?" That type of energy.
Yeah.
And I was like, "I'm tired of fighting. I don't want to fight anymore. I'm giving up fighting. If we can't be at peace, then I just rather, I don't know. I don't know what the heck I'm gonna do. Cause your mom. Like, I don't know. But I'm just tired of just fighting all the time. Every conversation we had was an argument. every single one. And I'm like, I'm not willing to risk my son losing anybody else, um, and not getting a chance to really spend that time with them. Because that's how my son hurt too, you know?
Hmm.
So I've lost pieces of me. I always wonder like what those relationships would have been like if I had been allowed to really cultivate them completely, you know, especially with my son's grandfather. I really, that one was, that hit me the hardest, probably.
So after like really dealing with all of it, you just really began to appreciate just life itself
Oh,
more.
absolutely. Absolutely. And then my aunt, the way that that ended up happening, you know, um, so many things that happened just that week. This was last year, April. So many things that happened just that week. Um, my cousin, my aunt, my other aunt that was in Chicago, she went in for a major surgery. My cousin was in a major car accident. She broke her hip and some other things. Like she was really banged up pretty bad. And then all of a sudden, my aunt is in the hospital with COVID, unresponsive, and she never came out. You know, and seeing that for the first time, someone take their last breath is, ooh, I don't wish that on anybody, especially somebody that you love. I don't wish that on anyone having to really see that. So I'm like, I feel this really heaviness for humanity, really, because like I know people are losing people every single day, you know,
Yep.
and understanding what that loss is and what that feels like and really seeing like the breaking of families and seeing, you know, just those dynamic shift and changes. Honestly, things haven't been the same for me since my grandfather passed away. My grandfather passed, I was 12. And I often wondered like why was my grandfather first and not my dad? And so it's probably horrible. But seriously, well my grandfather he struggled with alcoholism. Um he and my grandmother were married for I think like 30 something years or I think maybe 28 or 30 years. And I was just like, why wasn't it him? Like y'all could have you could have took him before you took my granddad because when my grandfather passed away, nothing was ever the same. Nothing.
And you pretty much, as I see it, is you had a lot of questions like that you wanted to
Yeah,
be answered, like why? You know, what's
yeah. I'm like, if this world is so karmic in that way, like what did this person do to deserve, you know, to leave this world before, you know, some of these people who are out here committing heinous crimes, getting away with the crap. But I have to really be at peace with the fact that it all comes back. I didn't realize how much my dad suffered. Like in his last days, he really didn't have anybody around. I think his karma was isolation. He didn't have anybody around. My siblings really didn't go around him like that. I wasn't around that much. He sat on the couch and was gone. Like came in, ate dinner, sat on the couch,
and that was it.
and that's where my stepmom found him unresponsive.
Wow.
So I feel like it's made me realize that you know as short as life is, we really have to just be be cognizant of how we treat other people, be understanding of others, but also I'm like, you know, I always say, you know, protect your heart, protect your mind, protect your peace. And you have to protect your heart, protect your mind, and protect your peace.
And really, how I see it is just be thankful for every day. Just really appreciative of every day. Grateful. Have a grateful
Mm,
spirit.
Right.
Every day I wake up and say the same thing. Another day, another
Right.
blessing. Because it truly
Right.
is. You never know when it's going to be the
Right.
last.
Absolutely. And I'm like, it's crazy. I'm like, I wish, folks got a warning, but it's not how the world works. It's not how it works. I just, try to stay out the way completely because I'm like, I want to make sure my son gets to be, grown and, at an age where he can sustain himself, things like that. And, you know, before I leave here, but, and even just seeing death through the eyes of my child is something, I tell you. If that isn't eye opening, I don't know what the heck is. Seeing death through the eyes of my child and understanding what that grief looks like to him.
Have you ever sat him down and talked to him about it? And
Yeah, yeah. And his realization is that everybody's going to die. And I don't know when. And I think that worries him a little bit. So the thing for us now is counseling for my son because before my aunt passed away last year, my uncle passed away in the end of 2019. And these are all my grandmother's children, by the way. Okay. So my grandmother, of her 9 children, she's lost 3. And now the other 6 are, some of them don't get along, some of them, don't talk to each other, like craziness.
and
And
I get
it's like, and I'm like, do they not get it? Do you not understand? Like, this is like, this life is just so short. Like, do you,
maybe in a way
girl?
that's what you have to do is kind of show them the way, and if you could, if you can, bring them back together. Maybe that's what you know the calling is. Maybe that's what's happening. That's why you're having this, realization going on.
Yeah, yeah. I'm like, I really do, and for now I could do still kind of stay. I have friends, and I'm probably more friends than the average person. And I'm saying friends; these are people who I consider like my really really good friends who I've known for years. But if I call them, they're gonna come, and if they call me, I'm gonna come. These are people that I know, completely have my back, and a, a situation that happened. A friend of mine, we've been friends since college. Um, he took me. It was funny because the first year we met freshman year of college, and that year, our birthdays are the same month, like 10 days apart. And he told me, he says, "I want you to come home with me for our birthday." And that's just the first year I'm meeting him, and I'm like, "Huh? Are you sure?" And he's like, "Seriously, I want you to come home with me for my birthday." And it was so funny to me because when he lived in New York, we went to school in Philadelphia, and he lived in New York. So I traveled with him to New York for his birthday, and we went to see the Color Purple musical on Broadway. Dope. This was like the first year that it was out. Amazing. And and his mom and his dad were so open and so sweet to me and so kind to me every time I visited, because of course that wasn't the first time. That was the only time. That was the first time, but wasn't the only time. I went back a few times after that. His mom was so sweet to me, and he called me probably, I think we were like 20, 22, 23. We were like 22. He called me and he said, my mom's not doing well. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, I'll be there. And I took a train ride to New York. It was 15 hours, grueling, comfortable, but long. By the time I made it there, his mom had passed. And I talked to him the other day, about that. I just said, I really feel like I was a bad friend because I don't know. I didn't understand like your grief and what you were going through. I didn't understand what that looked like,
Yeah.
at that age, you know? And I said, I mean, I apologize. I'm like, I don't feel like I was really a good friend. And the reassurance from him was, you're an amazing friend. You were definitely there for me. He was like, he's like, I couldn't believe that you actually came. You were there. And he was like, you never let me down as a friend. And look, that was what I needed. That was definitely what I needed.
All right, we're gonna
So,
have to wrap this thing up. I didn't realize how long we've
I
been
know.
on.
Oh wow, it really is 7:30. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we almost been on for almost 2.5
3 hours.
hours.
What?
But I just want to
What?
say thank you for coming on and just telling your story. It's truly incredible. I mean, just everything that you've gone through and to be where you're at right now and to see just the renewing of your mind and how everything is
Right,
going. It's awesome.
right. It's a story of resilience, I tell you.
And I believe whoever's watching right now, whoever's listening right now, this story touched you.
I hope so. I hope so.
Before we
I hope
wrap this
so.
thing up,
Hmm.
if somebody is dealing with similar issues like your story, what would your advice be to that person right now? What would you like to tell them?
Uh, Counseling is good. And whether it's faith-based counseling or whether it's like clinical counseling, talk to someone and find your tribe. It could be a group or just even group counseling, something. Talk through this. Talking for me is therapeutic. See, I do it a lot. So it's a lot of it, but talking is therapeutic, and that's for me. Um, Music, I really do believe that whatever you feed your spirit is what you're going to put out there in the world. So make sure you feed your spirit wholesome things. Whether it's music, whether it's reading, whether it's the people that you're around. Really understand, you know, to feed your spirit wholesome things.
Positivity, if you're not quite understanding what she's saying. Positive people. Also
Absolutely.
music, just in case you didn't understand that word. Positive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to end with a quote. This is my favorite quote, and it's actually a song lyric from India Ari. India Ari is one of my favorite artists, and she said, "The art of simplicity simply means making peace with your complexities."
Say it one more time, just in case they didn't hear you.
The art of simplicity simply means making peace with your complexities.
Now say it loud and clear.
The art of simplicity simply means making peace with your complexities.
Well said. Well said. Now, if anybody wants to reach out to you and talk to you personally, how can they do that?
Mhm. I am Tesha Ray on Facebook, and I believe my handle is Tisha, or no, it's the Sunray 5 on IG, on Instagram.
All right. You
All
guys heard
right.
it. You guys heard it here. You heard the incredible story. You heard the amazing voice. I just want to thank all you guys for watching. Thank you for listening. This is probably the longest podcast I've had so far. So if you made it all the way through, awesome. But anyway, if you'd like to tell your story sometime, feel free to just message me, and you could be the next person to tell your story, just like how she did. Anyway, I'm signing off here. Have a good night. Peace.